Thanks for tuning in for another edition of Feelin a Draft, the NFL draft show here on The Grueling Truth, where legends speak. I am your host, Dan Kornhauser, and happy Mock Draft Monday. It's going to be our first Mock Draft Monday of the NFL draft season. I will be doing a live mock right here, right now, with all you guys, going down the entire first round, team by team. I'll try to keep it under an hour, which means we're going to be doing about a couple of minutes or less per team. So we're just going to jump right into it. I want to let you guys know that this is an early exercise to see how the board might fall, what kind of players certain teams might be targeting over the next couple of months. And of course, this is all preliminary. This is just for fun at this point. We don't have any idea what players teams might be interested in. The rumor mill has not started spinning quite yet. Free agency hasn't gone on. The scouting combine is coming up this weekend, which will clear up even more of the picture once we get official numbers and measurables on everybody. And we hear more of rumors out of the scouting combine, what players met with what teams, what agents and team personnel and media people are hearing, and all this different stuff. So that's going to be fun, something to keep an eye on next week. So when we do this show next week, it'll be right in the middle of the scouting combine. So we'll have a lot to talk about, and I'll have Mike Goodpaster on the show with me next week, which will be great. But let's jump right into it. I'll be doing the mock draft on PFF. They have a pretty solid mock draft simulator, and maybe we'll use different ones in the future, but for now, this works. It's just me. So let's jump right into it. Let me just make sure this is, there we go. That's what we're looking for. Alrighty, so the first team on the clock is the Chicago Bears. I think this is pretty straightforward. And again, so you guys know, this is more, at this point, this is what I would be doing if I were the GM of these respective teams. I'm not going to be doing any trades or anything crazy like that. It's just going to be straight up 1 through 32. But just a heads up, that's what I'm doing. So if you're wondering, oh, well, what is this? This team may not, I haven't heard rumors about this player with this team. Don't worry about it. This is just what I would be doing if I were the GM. And starting with the Bears, the first thing that I would do is I would draft Caleb Williams, the quarterback out of USC, stud. I mean, we've heard enough about him at this point. You either love him or you hate him, but he's probably going number 1 overall. And at that point, you have Caleb Williams. You do have Justin Fields on the squad still, but I think they let him go via trade, get whatever they can get for him at this point, whether it be a second rounder and a third-day pick or whatever. Someone will give them a solid value for that player. And the main reason I think about moving on from Justin Fields at this point is mostly because you're going to have to pay him. And I don't know if I would feel comfortable as the general manager of Chicago paying this quarterback that kind of money, which, I mean, we saw what Daniel Jones got this offseason, a couple years ago, whatever, the 2-year deal, $40 million a year, something ridiculous. So that was hotly debated, and for good reason. It's not really sure even at this point if Jones is worth that kind of money, but that's a going rate for quarterbacks. And if that is still the case, I don't know if I want to give Justin Fields that kind of money. Not a fan. So with that in mind, if I'm going to move on from Fields, I'm going to need a quarterback, and it's going to be Caleb Williams if I'm the GM in this point. So now the Washington Commanders are on the clock. They're another team that could use a quarterback. There's rumors with this pick. Maybe they're not in love with one of these guys. Maybe they trade back. But again, I'm not doing trades here. So if I'm staying put at number 2 and I'm Washington, I'm running to the board and I'm to the podium, and I'm taking Drake May. Drake May, for me, coming into the year, Drake May was my top quarterback. He had an excellent year the year before. This year, he lost, a lot of weapons, offensive linemen, coaching. There was a lot going against him at North Carolina this year. So his play did fall off a bit. It was clear from the year before. But it wasn't like he was great and then he was bad. It was more like he was great, like top overall pick, great. And then he was just like a level below that. But for me, I'm not going to take too much stock in that. The physical talent is still there. I still think he's a franchise quarterback potentially. And if Washington's sitting on the board, they think the same, it would make perfect sense to take Drake May. The other option would be, where is he here? Did I pass him? I may have passed him. I didn't pass him. PFF is crazy. Wait a minute. Where's this guy at? Oh, here we go. The other option would have been Jaden Daniels. And now the New England Patriots are on the board. And this is another team that there's rumors that they may trade back. I'm not buying that too much. If I'm them, I stay put as well. And I take a quarterback. I take Jaden Daniels here at 3rd overall. Jaden Daniels has a lot of starts under his belt. He's got 55 starts, I believe, in college. And he's played very well at LSU the last couple of years. He's taken his play to the next level. He did win the Heisman this past year, ran for over 1,000 yards, and really played out of his mind this year for LSU. And it elevated him from, second, third day pick to a most likely a top 10 pick and even more likely a top 5 pick the way things are going at this point. I've seen him as high as number 2 in mock drafts lately. I'm not quite there yet. I still like Drake May more. But that just shows you where Jaden Daniels' stock is at this point. With the Arizona Cardinals on the clock at number 4 overall, I think this would be another run to the podium situation. Take Marvin Harrison Jr. They've already committed to Kyler Murray. So if you're not going to move on from him this year or probably next year, mostly due to cap issues, if they release him or trade him, it's going to be a crazy cap hit. But if you're not going to be moving on from him, it makes sense to build around him. Hollywood Brown, free agent wide receiver, might leave this offseason, and it's not like he's been amazing or anything like that anyway. And he's probably best served as a wide receiver 2 in the league. Marvin Harrison Jr. can step right in. He's arguably the best prospect in the draft. He's number 1 on my big board, and he's everything the name comes with. Plug and play wide receiver 1, which would lead us to the LA Chargers. Go Chargers, go. And with this pick, there was a few different directions that I could have gone here, but I'm going to give him Brock Bowers at this point. And for me, this offense is in a bit of a weird spot. They've got their quarterback, but their star running back, Austin Eckler, is a free agent. They have Keenan Allen at receiver, but I believe he's going in. He's got like 1 or 2 years left or something like that on his contract. He's also aging, something to consider. And he's, injuries are a thing you got to worry about. Same thing with Mike Williams. Mike Williams is there, but he's another one who likes to get injured, and it's a problem. Availability is the best ability when it comes to these to sports, and Mike Williams just ain't it. So they're going to have to ponder what they're doing at receiver. They do have Quentin Johnston there at receiver to help that position, but their tight ends, their starting tight end, their backup tight end, they're free agents. It's let these guys go. They're nothing special. Bring in Brock Bowers. Harbaugh likes running multiple tight end sets. So even if they bring back one of these vets, they can draft Brock Bowers, and it doesn't do anything negative. You're talking about arguably the best player in this class, one of the best players in this class, the best tight end prospect we've seen in a while. I think he's better than Kyle Pitts. He's more of a complete player than Pitts was coming out, and a similar athlete. And I think it'll be a home run for this offense, especially, what we've seen Harbaugh do with tight ends in his offense in the past. So it's worth noting. At number 6 overall, the New York Giants. Now, I'm seeing rumors that they're interested in Raiders offensive tackle Jermaine Ulamore and Patriots offensive guard Mike I hate names, Onwenu, which they could very well sign both of those guys, and they definitely need those upgrades. But if they don't end up getting those guys, or they only maybe sign one of them and not the other, maybe they add a guard and they don't add a tackle, or whatever the case may be, they're probably going to need to add 2 to 3 starters this offseason. They're set at left tackle. They should be set at center, but every other position pretty much could use some bolstering. So at this point, I think they would take an offensive lineman. I'll go with Fashanu here, Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle from Penn State. He's athletic as hell. He would be a plug-and-play offensive tackle. Put him at right tackle. You have Andrew Thomas at left. It makes perfect sense. And then you can move Evan Neal to guard, because I think that Evan Neal experiment at tackle is over. Maybe he can make something of himself at guard like Robert Gallery did back in his career. I think when he went to the Seahawks, and I think he played a little bit of guard with the Raiders before he left. But he went from a bust at offensive tackle to, a starter, a decent starter, useful starter at offensive guard. So maybe that can be the same for Evan Neal moving forward. With the Tennessee Titans on the clock at number 7, this is another team, two of the worst offensive lines in football, and two teams that should definitely consider making that upgrade. If I'm the Tennessee Titans general manager and one of these two offensive tackles is on the board, I'm taking whichever one's there. No reason to trade up. If one of them should be on the board at number 7, and in this case, Joe Alt is there, and I run to the podium to take Joe Alt. Now, with both of those last two picks, maybe a wide receiver is in the play, like a Malik Neighbors. He is amazing, and the rumors around Neighbors is that there's some teams that might have him above Marvin Harrison Jr. and have him as a top 2 or 3 prospect in this draft class, which for me, I'm not quite there. I'm fully on board with him being a top 10 pick. I'm fully on board with him being the second best receiver in this very talented and deep class. But I'm not on the Marvin Harrison is number 2 behind him quite yet. But with all that said, if he's on the board here at number 8, I think the Atlanta Falcons would do well to select this man. You'll have immediately the best young group of offensive skill position players in the NFL. You don't have a quarterback. Hopefully they pick up a veteran quarterback via trade or free agency or something like that. But regardless of what they do at quarterback, if you add Neighbors to this team, the explosive downfield threat that this offense lacks, you'll have London, Pitts at tight end, Brian Robinson at running back, and Malik Neighbors at the other wide receiver. That's crazy. And whoever steps in at quarterback would be ecstatic to get that sort of support. Where are we? Okay, number 9. Now, this pick for me, if I'm Chicago and I'm taking Caleb Williams, number 1, I can't screw this up. I can't. They already dropped the ball with Justin Fields. They didn't do quite enough. Kept changing offensive systems and coaching staffs and coaches and whatnot. They didn't have quite enough at receiver outside of DJ Moore. Cole Kmet's nice. DJ Moore is nice, but they needed more. They needed to do more for this kid, and they didn't. And I think this is a draft where they rectify that mistake. And if you're going to take Caleb Williams number 1, then I think it would do well for you to give him some elite support at this point. And rather than go with a defensive player that you might need, a corner, pass rusher, something like that, go with Rome. Go with Rome Odunze here. Plug him in opposite DJ Moore. You'll have Moore. You'll have Rome. You'll have Kmet. A nice little stable of running backs, assuming everybody's healthy. Roshan Johnson, Khalil Herbert, and go from there. And you draft a defensive lineman or cornerback on the second day and go there. Maybe you sign an offensive lineman in free agency, build up the front line, because I believe they released one. White. What's his? Hold on. Here we go. Bears. They just recently released this guy. I can't believe I forgot his name. This is so bad. Cody Whitehair. That was the one. So they released Cody Whitehair to save salary cap space. They're going to have to replace him. He played center. He played guard. So they'll have to account for that. Maybe they sign a center, draft a center late, but they'll have to address the offensive line at some point too. But Rome would be a win here. Number 10, New York Jets. Another team similar to the Giants, similar to the Titans, and need offensive line help for Aaron Rodgers coming back from an Achilles injury. And you take one of the top guys available, Tyalise Fuaga, who, I mean, he went off at the Senior Bowl. His stock went through the roof during Senior Bowl practice week. And it's already been reported that teams like the Jets are interested potentially in his services. And I don't think he goes higher than 10 because I'm not sure if he's a full-time left tackle or if he's going to be a right tackle. I'm not on board with moving him to guard. One of the bigger questions was going to be the length of his arms. You need long arms at offensive tackle. Shorter arms typically move you to inside to guard. some guys stay at tackle with shorter arms and have good careers. A guy like Charles Leno Jr., who started for the Bears for a while, started I think he's in Washington. He's made a nice career for himself, and he's below the prototype in height, weight, arm length, etc. He's more the exception than the rule, but it can be done. And luckily, Fuaga doesn't have to worry about that. His arm length was better than expected. I think that keeps him at offensive tackle. And for the Jets, I mean, unless they're going to trade down for a different prospect, or maybe they like another guy like Mims, I'm not in that not in that group of putting Mims above Fuaga quite yet, or J.C. Latham or somebody like that. But I think Fuaga would be a really solid pick, plug and play. The Jets also have a few free agents on the offensive line that they're going to have to replace. So I think this will be a priority. All right, number 11, the Minnesota Vikings. I think at this point, the hot rumor is giving them one of the quarterbacks. I'm not feeling that. I don't like any of these quarterbacks this high, which I say that out loud right now, and then immediately you'll see what's going to happen in the upcoming picks. But I see J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix as potential picks up here for the Vikings. There's rumors that the Vikings are one of the teams that are interested in trading up for one of the quarterbacks. So if New England or Washington aren't in love with one of these guys, whether it be May or Daniels or whoever, if they're not in love with them to take them at 2 or 3, maybe they trade down to 11 with the Vikings, and the Vikings trade up for one of those quarterbacks. But if they don't, and they're not high on J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix, which I personally am not, I'm not taking a quarterback. And if they're not buying it, then they should probably want to build up their defense a little bit more. I think there's a very good chance they re-sign Kirk Cousins, and if they do, you can address the defense. Daniel Hunter, DJ Wanham, Marcus Davenport, all edge rushers are all slated to be free agents. You can plug in a guy like Dallas Turner from day one and not miss a beat. Let me see. What do we got here? All right, Denver Broncos, number 12. Now, I was talking all this smack about these quarterbacks, and I'm not taking one of them, but I am going to take a quarterback for the Denver Broncos here. And the main idea is they're going to get rid of Russell Wilson. They will need a quarterback. I haven't heard much about them trading up. And there's rumors that a guy like J.J. McCarthy has a lot more love in the NFL than he does thus far in the media, which is certainly possible. It wouldn't be the first time, wouldn't be the last time that the NFL likes a player a lot more than the media people do. But it's just gross. I don't want to do it. I didn't even want to take this pick here because I think this would be a reach. But I'll put Michael Penix Jr. here. One of the main issues with Russell Wilson in this offense isn't that he sucks. I mean, he put up, at least statistically, he had a good year. And so it's not so much that he's bud and he's fallen off like Owen. It's more that he didn't fit the offense that Sean Payton likes to run. This is a timing offense. This is a on script kind of offense where you drop back and you get rid of the ball. And Russell Wilson is a creator. He's a guy who likes to make plays from the pocket. He likes to move around. Even at his advanced age, he's not a scrambler. He's not going to run for 1,000 yards, but he still has that mobility and escapability in the pocket. And that just doesn't work in Sean Payton's offense. So that's one of the things I was hearing was a big issue in Denver this year, where Russell Wilson is more of a do-it-yourself kind of guy and scramble around and make plays like that. Penix is a pocket passer. He makes his plays in the pocket. He's got a nice downfield ball. He's got one of the best deep balls in this draft class. He's accurate to all levels, and the health is a concern, but he's accurate to all levels of the field. I'm not too worried about him at this point. He's another one who's got a ton of starts, and he was fully healthy the last 2 years. He looked a bit banged up in the national chip, but he stuck it out. He stayed in the pocket. He was getting hit, he was getting up, and he was making throws, and he was trying to do his thing to get his team back in it. So I'm going to go Michael Penix here just to be a little different, just to mix it up. The other thing, maybe they go receiver if they trade one of their top two guys. Jerry Jeudy's been someone who's been on the trade block for the last year and a half. So that's certainly possible. A trade down is certainly possible. Sean Payton getting more picks and taking one of these other guys later. But I digress. Moving on. The Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders. So this was a tough one for me to ponder over. But again, this is not to be right. This is just to get the wheels turning and get the brain biscuits cooking. So I went with I went with a fun direction because the Vegas Raiders are another team. They're talking about potentially taking a quarterback. There seems to be a theme here. A lot of teams need quarterbacks, and there ain't a lot of quality quarterbacks to go around. So someone's going to be disgusted and end up with Gardner Minshew or something like that, and they're going to be grossed out. Their fans are going to be grossed out. But again, that'll happen. In this case, if the Raiders think that Aiden O'Connell deserves another chance, I believe it was a 4th-round pick out of Purdue this past year. If they think he should stay at quarterback and get another shot, then they can build around him. For me, the offensive line will need attention. They've got 3 starters headed for free agency, including the aforementioned right tackle, and he has guarded experience at guard, Jermaine Ulamore, who I mentioned earlier the Giants are interested in, apparently. So if that's the case, they want to rebuild the offensive line. Ulamore leaves as a free agent. A guy like Amarius Mims could be a very good pick. He's young, he's raw, but the athleticism is there, the talent is there, and he showed out at times for Georgia this past year, and he looked really solid. I think it's something to build around, and teams will take athletic offensive linemen and hope for the best. They just will. They'll think they can coach them up, and if they do, the Raiders have a 10-year starter on offensive tackle. The Saints now at number 14 overall. Saints are a weird team, man. They're in salary cap hell. They're going to have to release a bunch of guys, restructure a bunch of contracts. It's going to get ugly in New Orleans. Oh, and I think I read something about Taysom Hill having a higher salary cap hit than Christian McCaffrey, and I forgot who the other player was, but it was a couple of guys with high cap hits, or should be as high cap hits, and somehow Taysom Hill is making more than them. Well, at least on the salary cap. He's counting against cap more than them, which is gross and weird. But anyway, so the Saints are a tough team to mock for, especially at this point in the offseason. There was a few directions I can go. At the end of the day, I decided to go with Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU, who, listen, just because he was the wide receiver 2 behind Neighbors doesn't mean anything. Okay, he's extremely talented. He's big, good red zone target, and I know they have Chris Olave, but they don't have anything else at the position. Michael Thomas is a shell of his former self. I believe he has 1 year left on his contract, and he can't stay healthy, so you can't rely on him. And they also have free agents at receiver, and with all these other holes that they're going to have, with all these other free agents and the salary cap hell that they're in, I don't know if they'll be able to afford to re-sign some of these guys at receiver that they're potentially going to lose to free agency. So they'll need to rebuild during the draft. Luckily for them, this year's draft class is one of the deepest that we've had in the last few years at the receiver position. So they could go another route here, maybe on defense or the offensive line potentially. Offensive tackle seemingly a problem, even though they added Penning a couple of years ago. It hasn't really worked out thus far. So maybe they go offensive tackle here, which would be fine. Like a J.C. Latham or something like that. But I'll give him Brian Thomas, give him another starting wide receiver so Carr actually has some weapons and can maybe do something with it. Number 15, the Indianapolis Colts. This pick here is assuming they bring back Michael Pittman Jr., who just had a career high in receptions this year. He was over 100 receptions, something ridiculous. I think he was like 4th or 5th in the league in receptions. I mean, part of that is because of their quarterbacks Minshew funneling him the rock, but he's good. He's right. He's a number 1. You give your number 1 guys those targets. But again, this is assuming they bring him back. So if they re-sign Michael Pittman, they can focus on other needs. And one of the bigger needs that they have for me is at cornerback. And I think this would be a good spot to take a guy like Terrion Arnold, who in this year's draft class, there's not a consensus number one corner like there is in most years. But he's in one of those names at the top of the board. He's one of those names in the conversation. And him, Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins out of Clemson, Quinion Mitchell from Toledo, he's on a rocket ship. His stock is through the roof at this point. He's another one, arguably was the best defensive player at the Senior Bowl and just dominated in the one-on-ones and team drills and stuff like that. Really made a name for himself, and he's going to be a mid to late first round pick. I think lock it up for sure. 100%. I think he's going to be mid to late round at worst. And if he works out really well at the scouting combine this upcoming week, maybe he's the first corner off the board, and maybe he goes higher than 15. Who knows? But there's a lot of options, and there's no consensus number one. Arnold should be in the conversation. He's an athletic corner. He makes plays against the run, and he'll start on the outside immediately for Indianapolis. I think that would be a win. I'd give that an A if they took that man in the draft in real life. And then that would put the Seattle Seahawks on the clock. And now that they're bringing back Geno Smith, I think he's got 1 year left on his deal. Maybe they trade him this offseason, but maybe their new head coach wants that veteran guy in there. Maybe they take a developmental quarterback on the second or third day and let Geno start this year and let the young guy take over next year when Geno's contract is up. So assuming something like that happens, they should probably pay attention to the interior of the offensive line. Now, at this point in the draft, there's no centers that I would take at this point, as much as I like Jackson Powers-Johnson, and I do believe he will be a first-round pick. I'm not taking him at 16 overall right now. I would probably lean towards Troy Fautanu, the offensive tackle from Washington. As I mentioned earlier with Fuaga, the arm length is important for offensive tackles, and there's a concern that Fautanu may not have the requisite arm length to stick at offensive tackle. And in the case of the Seahawks, even though their two young offensive tackles, Abraham Lucas and Cross, fell off this year, they didn't play as well as they did as rookies, they're not going to get replaced. They're going to be the Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas are going to be the offensive tackles. So you draft Fautanu and plug him in inside. Their offensive line on the interior is awful, and I feel like it's been bad, and they just haven't addressed it. So I think now it's time. Fautanu was a left tackle in college. Put him at guard, and I think you have a 10-year starter, and you don't have to worry about that. 17, here we go. Now, one of my favorite prospects in this class. This was another weird one, but we don't know what's going to happen in free agency. So in the off chance that they don't franchise tag Josh Allen, who had an excellent year rushing the passer for them, and he leaves in free agency or they trade him or something like that, they're going to need to replace him because they also have a few other edge players who are free agents. They're more rotational guys like Chazon, a previously failed bust of a first-round pick out of LSU. But if Josh Allen leaves, or even if he comes back, but they can't can't sign him to a long-term contract, and he has a 1-year deal, and they got to deal with this again, maybe they just opt to draft a guy like Laitu Latu and plug him in on the edge, either in Josh Allen's space, or if Allen leaves in free agency, or on the opposite side of Allen, and have a young, dynamic pass-rushing duo. I love Latu. As I think for the rookies coming out this year, he has the best set of pass rush moves of any edge rusher in this class. He rushes with power. He rushes with speed. He's prototype size and length. He's another one who had some injury questions. He had injuries that forced him to take a couple of years off, but it looks like those might be behind him. And if that's the case and he gets a clean bill of health at the scouting combine, then I think he's a lock for a top 20 pick. I'd be comfortable taking him in the top 15 at that point. So I'll take a lot to 17 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Have a little sip of my beer with my whistle. Okay, and now here we go. 17, Cincinnati Bengals. Another team that needs to address the offensive line. And it's not very likely that all these teams are going to go for their top need or their perceived top needs or whatever like that. Like maybe the Giants and the Titans draft wide receivers at those spots. Maybe the Jets trade down and take, an offensive guard instead of an offensive tackle. Maybe the Seahawks do something crazy and take Kingsley Suamataya or whatever at 16 overall, because they love taking random players really high, but like Bruce Irvin all those years back. But anyway, assuming the board falls this way and this guy is still on the board, if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals, I would be extremely comfortable taking him. J.C. Latham, the offensive tackle from Alabama. You plug him in at right tackle, and you don't look back. Jonah Williams is a free agent, but he is useless and totally replaceable. I wouldn't shed a tear if I'm a Cincinnati Bengals fan, and I don't think they would be either. Williams is just mediocre. He's going to get a job somewhere else, only because there's such a lack of talent on the offensive line in the NFL these days, particularly at tackle. So he's going to get a job somewhere. I'm sure Bengals fans are just hoping it's not back in Cincinnati. At this point, if they can take a guy like Latham, plug him in at offensive tackle, that's a win. Tyler Guyton is another one who would be in high consideration. Jordan Morgan, who's one of the best pass blockers in this class, put him at left tackle potentially. He only gave up 2 sacks over the last 12 games. So maybe that could be a nice fit as well. But I like Latham at this point for the Cincinnati Bengals. 19, the LA Rams. Another weird team. I mean, they're another one. They can go in a number of directions. They could look at a quarterback here because Matt Stafford is getting up there in age, and a career of dealing with injuries and being a tough guy and not missing a lot of games. It's caught up to him. He's already been hit with the injury bug. It might happen again. They need offensive line help. They need D-line help. They need a little bit of everything. In this instance, I think they should address the defensive line, the edge in particular. Michael Holt was one starter on one side. He's nothing special. Byron Young, who they drafted out of Tennessee, has some potential. He's athletic. He's young. He deserves, more time on the outside, more full-time run on the outside. But they need a difference maker. They need somebody else out there. And I think a guy like Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State, with his explosiveness and his versatility, would fit in perfectly with the LA Rams. And I have them taking him at 19 overall. Let me see here. Okay. Number 20, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So last year, the Steelers traded up and selected Broderick Jones out of Florida State to start at one tackle. It was a little rough at the beginning. He figured it out as a year went on, and he'll be fine. He'll be plugged in as one of the offensive tackles this upcoming season. Isaac Seumalo, who they signed in free agency, was a good signing at guard. So those are good additions, but they still need to build it up front. Tyler Guyton, I mentioned him earlier, would be perfect. He's got prototype size and length. He had an excellent Senior Bowl as well. You're seeing a theme there where guys who go off at the Senior Bowl get a lot of love. And this one in particular is for my former co-host, Sam Teets. And he had mentioned a few weeks ago, actually, that he thinks Tyler Guyton is a lock for the top 20. At the time, I was not on board with such a sentiment, and I'm still not sure if I am. I could see Tyler Guyton falling to the back end of the first round, but I do think he's a first-round lock. And at number 20, he goes to the Steelers. Sam's a Steelers fan. I think Sam would love this pick. And I'm going to reach out to him later, and I'll share with you guys on next week's show what Sam thought about this mock, in particular that pick. But I think that would be a win for the Steelers. Number 21, the Miami Dolphins. Another team, another one that needs to address their offensive line. And for them, they've got a few guys hitting free agency. Guard Robert Hunt, Isaiah Wynn, who plays guard and tackle. I think he played guard for them. Center Connor Williams. Now, Williams played well when he was on the field, but he missed half this season just about due to injury, as did Hunt and Wynn. And injuries seem to be a problem with the Miami Dolphins every year on their offensive line. They're always shuffling guys around. It's weird. They're one of the few teams that have that problem every year, seemingly, where several guys get hurt and they gotta just piece it together with whatever they can. But this will help alleviate some of those issues, especially if they lose some of these guys to free agency, like a Connor Williams. If that's the case, they're going to need to beef up the interior. I think Jackson Powers Johnson would be an excellent fit for them. He could slide right in at center. If they bring back Williams, maybe they play Jackson Powers Johnson at guard. He hasn't played that long as a full-time center. I think he only played this year at the position, but he can play multiple positions regardless. Plug him in on the interior, and you don't look back. Another one who should be a 10-year starter on the interior as long as he's healthy. Number 22, the Philadelphia Eagles. This was another weird one because this is a good team, and there's a lot of rumors swirling around them. Is Jalen Hurts the man at quarterback? Is he more what we saw a couple of years ago when they ran to the Super Bowl, or is he more what we saw this year where it's really inconsistent and the offense struggled to move and they couldn't run the ball real well and nothing was really working offensively? A.J. Brown was a malcontent as the season wore on. So there's a lot of smoke around Philly at this point. So it's tough to say what they might be considering at this point in the draft, but they should address that defensive secondary. It was atrocious. Darius Slay was not very good at all. James Bradbury was awful, just terrible. And the secondary as a whole was just bad. It was one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. I think this would be a good spot for Quinton Mitchell, who I mentioned earlier, the corner out of Toledo, one of the best defensive players at the Senior Bowl, had an excellent season. And yeah, it's a small school, but that doesn't mean anything. He's got good size, good athleticism. Another guy who you can just plug right in from day one, and he fills a huge hole in that secondary. If they trade A.J. Brown, maybe a wide receiver becomes a top priority. Maybe they trade back for a Ladd McConkey or Troy Franklin or one of those guys, Keon Coleman potentially, if they want a bigger receiver and a red zone target. But I think they have to address that secondary. The Houston Texans. This is a good one. Pick number 23. They're in a good spot. They have a few. The key thing is, though, I think they have a few players headed to free agency in their secondary, including Steven Nelson, one of their starting outside corners. Enter Nate Wiggins. He's an elite athlete, good ball skills, good size. He could very well go higher than this, and there's rumors that he might run very fast at the scouting combine. If that's the case, his stock is going to go through the roof, and he could very well be a top 15 pick if he does indeed run as well as the rumors say. So keep an eye out for that, but this would be an excellent pick for them at 23 overall and fills a huge hole for them as well. Wiggins on one side, Derek Stingley on the other. That's nice. The Dallas Cowboys, number 24. So Dallas is another team in a weird place. And this pick might surprise their fans and might surprise some of you watching, but I think it makes perfect sense. If I'm them, I want to keep a strength. And we know how important the offensive line is. They may not consider it as a huge need potentially at this point, but Tyron Smith, their longtime left tackle, who is often injured, also getting up there in age, but he's still elite, he's hitting free agency. If they can't bring him back for salary cap reasons or whatever, because they do have a few other free agents you got to consider, they're going to have to replace him. They don't have anyone on the roster currently who can replace him properly. Right tackle Terrence Steele was healthy, but his play fell off. He did not play up to the contract that they gave him. And they're going to need an actual left tackle. Jordan Morgan, who I mentioned earlier, one of the best pass blockers in this class. Let's see here. There we go. Offensive tackle from Arizona. Plug and play. We'll put him at left tackle. As I mentioned earlier, he gave up only 2 sacks over 12 games this past season. And he's been one of the better pass blockers over the last couple of years. They do some passing out in the Pac-12. So I think that's a seamless transition for him. Then they can figure out what else they want to do offensively with all their other free agents and whatnot. But this way, they keep an offensive strength strong, keep the offensive line built up. The Green Bay Packers, number 25. And this is another squad with a lot of questions in the secondary. A bunch of key defensive backs with expiring contracts. Jair Alexander, I don't know if it was Instagram or Twitter, but posting something on social media that was very cryptic, making people think that maybe he's on his way out. They could save, I think, about $15 million or so if they trade him or release him, I believe, after as a post-June 1 designation. If I remember correctly, I don't know if I remember if it's 12 or 15 mil or something like that, but it's a substantial amount of money that they can save if they get rid of him. So that might be something they consider. So, but even if they bring him back, they do have to restock the talent in that secondary. I think Cooper DeJean would be a great fit. He was a cornerback at Iowa. He has the size and athleticism to also play in the slot or even at safety. So they can really move him around in different spots and take advantage of his versatility. I think that's a great fit if he drops that far, because DeJean is another one. I've seen him in other mocks as high as a top 10, top 15 pick. I don't know if he goes that high at this point, but he's another player where the rumors are swirling that he also might dominate at the scouting combine. And if he puts up some crazy numbers, teams are desperate for good cornerback play and good players, versatile players for their secondaries. Guys who can cover the slot, guys who can cover tight ends, guys who can move on the outside if needed. And with all their guys leaving, they might want a player like him. Or the next player who's going to be taken, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the clock. And this is yet another squad. A bunch of key free agents: Mike Evans, Levante David, Baker Mayfield, Antoine Winfield Jr., just to name a few. Those are key guys. Now, they're probably bringing Baker Mayfield back. It sounds like they're going to be working on a 3 or 4 year contract. He's going to be making 25 to 30 mil a year, give or take, most likely. So that's cool. They bring back their guy, their quarterback. But then you've got guys like Evans, David, Winfield Jr., key pieces. Can they afford to bring all these guys back? They're going to have to make some moves to adjust the cap. And the way the NFL is in the era of free agency, you can't re-sign everybody. Everybody can't get paid. It's just the way it is. It ain't baseball out here. So somebody's going to hit the open market. Is it going to be Levante David? Is it going to be Antoine Winfield Jr.? You know, safeties don't win Super Bowls. Linebackers don't win Super Bowls. No one's ever going to say, oh, this team won the Super Bowl because of their elite safety play. That might be a piece of the puzzle, but there's a reason linebackers and safeties aren't getting paid like offensive tackles, corners, quarterbacks, receivers. You know, they're just more valuable positions elsewhere, edge rushers. And now we're seeing interior linemen who can push the pocket. Chris Jones is going to get a fat contract. We're going to see a couple of defensive linemen drafted this year who are good interior pocket pushers. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Mike Evans, they're talking about Mike Evans and the team are pretty far apart on their contract negotiations. I don't know what they're so far apart with. I don't know if it's bonus money, if it's the signing bonus, if it's guaranteed money, if it's, I don't know what it is. Deferment money, I don't know. Whatever it is, it's dumb. They should figure it out because Mike Evans has been the definition of consistency for this team over the last decade. He's a shoo-in for 1,000 yards. Even when the quarterback play is questionable, he's a shoo-in. So I don't know how you can let a guy like that go. But if they lose one of these guys, Evans, David, Winfield Jr., they might use this first-round pick to replace him. In this instance, assuming they bring back Evans and Mayfield, maybe there's not enough to go around and they can't bring back a guy like Antoine Winfield Jr. And if he leaves in free agency for one reason or another, they'll need to pick up someone to fill up that hole in the secondary. Now, this player, Kool-Aid McKinstry, the corner from Alabama, he's a corner, but he's a bigger corner. And I think he's got the athleticism and the physicality and the size to fit as a free safety center field type of corner, center field type of safety. Sorry, and if they need him to, they obviously can put him at corner. They do have a few pieces in the secondary that can play corner well. I don't think they have any starters on the outside or anything like that hitting free agency. But again, the NFL likes versatile guys in their secondary, guys who could play multiple roles, and McKinstry could. It's not a seamless fit. For me, this was my first yuck kind of pick of the draft, but this is really low, I think, for Kool-Aid McKinstry. And this is another player who rumors are swirling that he might also test really well at the combine. So maybe he's not even on the board at number 26. Who knows? But in this case, he was. And I take him. It's a win. Let's see here. The Arizona Cardinals, number 27 overall. This was between two guys. These two guys, actually, coincidentally. And I gave them Jazon Newton, the defensive lineman from Illinois. He has experience as both a 3 technique and a 5 technique, so he fits perfectly in Arizona's front. They typically like to run out with 3 defensive linemen. He can be one of those guys on the edge, not a nose tackle, but he can play, like I said, the 3 technique, the 5 technique, and they need defensive line help badly. For me, it's one of the worst defensive fronts in the NFL. So they're going to address that at some point. Maybe they take the other guy, Byron Murphy, here at this spot, which would also be a good pick. But I think Newton having the experience at the 3 technique, the 5 technique is what they might lean towards more. Okay. Home stretch. We're making good time. Let me see here. So we're 47 minutes in, and we're already on Buffalo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picks left. Wow. All right, let's switch beers here. That's a good one, Hefeweizen. Anyway, Buffalo, yes, back on track. So Buffalo needs receiver help. Stephon Diggs, there's rumors that he may be on his way out sooner than later. Those rumors have been swirling since last offseason. They were swirling during this season, and he had a rough second half of the year. He wasn't his Stephon Diggs self. And the production was leaving some to be desired, but it's something to monitor this offseason. I don't know if they're going to get rid of him this year. Maybe they get rid of him next year or he leaves next year. But regardless, even with him, Gabe Davis is a free agent. They probably wouldn't take in a receiver at some point anyway, even with Davis on the squad, because let's be real, Gabe Davis is at best a wide receiver 3 kind of guy. I know he's an outside guy, but he just doesn't inspire any sort of confidence. He's been the number 2 for a couple of years and been wildly average more often than not. So I think someone like Keon Coleman, the 6'4", 215 give or take pound receiver out of Florida State, would be an excellent selection. Josh Allen would have another red zone target, a big target. You'll have him on the outside. You'll have Diggs on the outside. They're going to take a slot guy at some point, but maybe they like Khalil Shakir or whatever his name is out of Boise State. They drafted him in the 3rd round, I think, a few years ago. Then maybe they like him as a slot receiver, and then they'll have Dalton Kincaid. So that's a nice group of receiving talent for Josh Allen. Detroit Lions. All right, so with the Detroit Lions, I think it's amazing that they made the NFC Championship, but this team still needs major upgrades, particularly in the secondary. If the Lions see a player like this on the board, I don't know how they would pass on him. The Lions were excellent against the run. They were one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL that showed up in the playoffs as well against the 49ers. They let them come back. Ennis Rakestraw Jr., the corner out of Missouri. He can play on the outside. He can play in the slot. He's great in zone coverage. A day one starter in Detroit. Maybe they look to shore up the interior of the offensive line, add some depth at guard potentially. Maybe they look to add some more talent up front on the front seven on defense, but I think they have to go corner. They got to do something in that secondary. And I don't think just, drafting a second or third day guy or maybe signing some mid-level free agent is the way to go. They brought in Cam Sutton as a free agent, and he had his good moments, but when he had to do things he wasn't supposed to, he didn't play well, and he got beat a lot, and it was a problem. He's probably best served in the slot. You do not want him out the outside, but even then, it was ugly. So they need an influx of talent. Rakestraw Jr. would be a solid selection this late in the first. And then the Baltimore Ravens. Now, just as the Ravens do, this happens every single year, and people always ask, how do the Ravens do it? Why does this always happen for the Ravens? They're always picking late in the first round, and they always end up having some stud drop to them. Well, it happened again here because Byron Murphy II was on the board at 30th overall, and if that's the case in real life, even though they might like a corner or a receiver, I don't know how you could pass on Murphy at this point. Now, they do have Justin Matabuki, who had an excellent season. He had a career-high 13 sacks, but he is a pending free agent as well. And the team has a bunch of key players hitting free agency potentially. There's only so much money to go around. They're going to lose people. And Matabuki is going to probably get one of the higher contracts in free agency this offseason. So if they don't franchise tag him and he does leave, they're going to have to fill that hole. Byron Murphy, I think, would be an excellent pick. He took a big step forward in his development this season at Texas. He's quick at the point of attack. He's an excellent interior pass rusher. And somehow another A-plus draft pick for the Baltimore Ravens. Only them. The 49ers are down to the final two, and we're making good time, 52 minutes and change. Thank you guys for watching so far. Oh, here we go. What's up with the Steelers? Robert Carter. Rob, you missed the Steelers pick earlier. Hold on a second. Let me go back up here. So I had them taking Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma, who, as I mentioned earlier, his stock is rising. The Senior Bowl was a big talk of Senior Bowl week. And my buddy Sam Teets thinks Guyton is a lock for the top 20. I'm not quite there yet, but I do think he's a guaranteed first-round pick, and it wouldn't surprise me to go in the top 20 at all, considering all these teams need offensive line help. So this pick was kind of for him, and I think it's a win. I hope you like it. And you're right, Robert Carter. I don't think you guys should take a quarterback in the first round. If it's me, I let Kenny Pickett come back, and I maybe add someone in free agency, a veteran guy. There's rumors that they might be interested in trading for Justin Fields. I've seen that as a very common match. I don't know how I feel about that. You already have one quarterback who you have questions about. Do you really want to bring in another one there's still questions about him and his development and his ability as a passer, as to take the team to that next level? I think they'd be better off with a guy like Gardner Minshew or a veteran quarterback like that, someone to help Kenny Pickett along in his development, as opposed to someone who can just take his job potentially, like a Justin Fields. But thank you for the questions, Mr. Carter. I will post any other ones as they pop up. Okay, but here we go. The final two picks at the 54-minute mark. The 49ers. Graham Barton, offensive lineman from Duke. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. I like this range for him. And for the 49ers, outside of offensive tackle Trent Williams and maybe John Feliciano, their offensive guard, the offensive line is bad, and they need upgrades badly. Colton McKivitz is one of the worst right tackles in the league. very, very, very much below average and definitely replacement level. So even though Barton was a left tackle at Duke, maybe he can start at right tackle in McKivitz's place. Let McKivitz be that swing tackle type, or just cut them all together. If Barton struggles at right tackle, or if Williams gets hurt at left tackle and he moves to left tackle and he struggles out there, then you can move him to guard. I think he would be just fine as a starting guard. They could also use an upgrade at guard. And as good as Feliciano was for them, he's a journeyman. He's not a building block. Maybe you give him another year or something like that, but I'm not sold on him. If they replaced him this year or next, why not? And then finally, the Kansas City Chiefs, your Super Bowl champion. If the board falls this way, they've got some really nice options. There's a lot of good players on the board. I like Chopper Robinson. I like these receivers. But I'm not going to overthink it. I'm not going to go too crazy. I'm going to take Troy Franklin if I'm them. Big, fast, elite speed size combo. He can be the downfield threat that this offense sorely needs. And I don't know why this is taking so long. Here we go. So yeah, let me go down here. Yeah, Troy Franklin. So he fills a huge hole on this offense. They can run the ball. Mahomes is amazing. They have Travis Kelce for the middle of the field. And Rashee Rice had an excellent rookie season, but he needs a running mate. Kadarius Toney is a bust. Marquez Valdes-Scantling drops too many passes in big moments. Sky Moore has failed to develop I believe he was a second or third rounder. So that's a lot of whiffs. That's 3 strikes right there. It's ugly. Travis Kelce isn't getting any younger. He went through spurts this season where he did not look like himself. You're gonna have to give Patrick Mahomes some help. I get it. When you have a legend at quarterback, you don't need to give them a number one receiver like this. You don't got to pay a guy 20, 25, 30 mil a year at receiver. That's why they let Tyreek Hill go. They weren't going to pay him that money. But they still need to give this guy some help. Even Tom Brady got help, after a while of throwing to Troy Brown and David Patton and BS and these butt slot receivers. They gave him Randy Moss. They gave him Rob Gronkowski. They gave him weapons. And he went from, that check down passer, short pass, screens, dump offs, etc., to the running back, to a quarterback who pushed it downfield. Him and Randy went off. So that's not a coincidence. When you give elite quarterbacks elite weapons, I mean, look what Jamar Chase did for the Cincinnati Bengals. Look what Tyreek Hill did for the Miami Dolphins, and the list goes on and on. You give an elite quarterback elite weapons, and he's going to do elite shit with them. And they need a receiver. It makes sense. So here's the first right here. Leave that on the screen. So hold on. I shut it down. What am I doing? What are we doing? Here we go. No, not that one. That's the one. I know that's not the one. That's the one. There we go. Bam. All right. So leave that up there for a hot second. Nope, it's still looking at me. Still figuring this out. There we go. That's the one. So there it is. Leave that up there for a moment so you can take a gander. I will also be posting, it's Mock Draft Monday, so the mock draft will be posted on The Grueling Truth. So you can check it out. You can see my thoughts written down, pick by pick. Leave any comments, questions, concerns. Share it, of course, if you like it. Critique it. Hit me up on Twitter. Yeah, hit me or on X. Sorry, hit me up on X at DB Talking Sports. D as in Dan, B as in Bob, and I will respond. Give us a follow. Give us a like. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. Robert Carter, thank you for the questions. Another edition of Feelin' a Draft is complete. Thank you guys for tuning in. I am your host, Dan Kornhauser. Hope you had a good one. Happy Mock Draft Monday, and we'll see you next week.